We're good to... Yes. Hello, everyone. You can see us, we can't see you, and that's good for us. We're going to have an intimate conversation for that reason. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope the previous session was very interesting and you met young people. For us, we're going to talk about, let me call it the future, and where AI is. Our topic today is AI and frontier technologies, catalyzing synergies for future economic growth. My name is Esther Kunda, and I'm the Director General in charge of Innovation and Emerging Technologies within the Ministry of ICT and Innovation. And happy to host you if it's your first time in Rwanda, but always come back. And my esteemed guest today, and none other than Fred Swanika, who's the founder and CEO of Sun Technologies. Happy to have you. Aisha Walcott-Bryant, Head of Google Research Africa, and Ms. Emmanuelle Gan, Chief of Digital Trade and Frontier Technology Unit at WTO. If you don't know, WTO is the World Trade Organization. All right, so these are my esteemed panels. They've worked in various areas in their previous work, and they are really at the forefront of people who can talk about how AI as a technology in itself, it's not evolving in isolation. It's merging with other technologies, whether you can think about biotechnology, robotics, data, and in other various areas. We've seen and we've had many people talk about it in terms of climate solution, advancing healthcare, sustainable and equity development. So what we want to discuss today is what each of our three panelists today are doing in that area, or what their opinion of the future looks like in the coming years. So let me quickly start with Aisha and talking about Google. And as you know, you've established, we know Google has established AI research teams in Africa. Do you mind elaborating on how this local research focus is exploring the convergence of AI with other frontier technologies and how it addresses Africa's unique challenges?
Yes, so really great question. I think being local, number one, is key. So we have teams in Ghana and teams in Kenya working in research. The way that we look at the work that we do in general is very much problem motivated. And is AI the right approach to helping to solve that problem? It's usually not the only answer. It takes a lot to truly solve a large-scale, worldwide type problem, but we look at its role. And so looking at frontier technologies like you spoke about, some of our work that we've already done, including what we've just launched, which is weather nowcasting for Africa. It means that we're leveraging various satellite data to help with precipitation, temperature, to provide accurate forecasts across all of Africa through search. And this, at the core, leverages AI plus the frontier technology in order for us to solve this problem of weather forecasting across Africa, which is so important and impactful for us in terms of agriculture being very important and food production to our daily decision making. So that's one area where I see some of our research using cutting edge technology. Another area is work in healthcare, especially maternal health. So we have a project on mobile ultrasound in collaboration with Jacaranda Health in Kenya, where we're supporting healthcare workers to reach more women more consistently throughout their pregnancy through mobile ultrasound probes. And this is super important for all the maternal care and the health of the baby, the life of the mother. So extending these technologies with AI is important for that reach in that space. And then lastly, I'll say one thing. You had mentioned robotics. I've actually did my PhD in robotics. I find comfort that much of the algorithms that we use for mobile robots, robots exploring various spaces, those core algorithms are what's being used in healthcare and drug discovery in our work in food security, so using computer vision, so those algorithms around agriculture and production. So we leverage from those frontier technologies and then also contribute to those technologies as a research team.
Thank you very much, Aisha. And coming to you, Fred, and probably you had Aisha talk about health, and I couldn't stop and think about the work that Sun Technology is currently doing in various areas. I'd want you to give us a glimpse of how the impact that these solutions are making today, and what you see that we're looking and the novel frontier technologies that you're using.
Sure. So, people who know me know that one of my mantras is do hard things, right? And this is really saying that if you're privileged, you should not be solving small problems and easy problems. You need to be solving the biggest problems, the hardest problems in the world. So when you look at a lot of, the excitement around artificial intelligence, and you actually look at the problems it's solving, it's not necessarily solving the hardest problems. It's like, okay, that's a cat. The AI can write a poem for you, right? That's exciting, yes. But what we're saying that the cost to society of AI is so high, right, in terms of the energy we're using, the resources to train the models, and the financial cost, billions of dollars being invested in, that let it solve really meaningful problems that are going to make a difference to the world. So we are using artificial intelligence to solve problems in healthcare, climate change, access to water, access to telecommunications. These are big problems that we need to solve for humanity, right? So, for example, and so the models that we build are modeling the real world, right? And the data that we use is coming from sensors that, are monitoring everything, because we have billions of sensors now in the world because of the Internet of Things and so many other advances of the last couple of decades. So that gives you a lot of data that allows you to model an entire system at scale. So a healthcare system for a whole country, a telecommunications network for a whole country or for a continent. So one of the problems we're working on is with the Partnership for Digital Access in Africa, which is trying to bring connectivity to 600 million people in Africa. So we are building the algorithms to map out which parts of Africa you need to put fiber and mobile towers to actually close that digital divide, right? And there's lots of data that we're using from satellites and all kinds of things to figure that out. Our AI systems run the water supply for the City of London, right? Our talent sits in Africa, and we've built a digital twin of the whole network of the City of London. And we can predict when a pipe is going to burst in the city. We can prevent pollution from happening in the ocean, to the oceans and rivers. We even have sensors in the rivers that monitor the health of the river. So before you drink, you can put your home address, and we can tell you the water you're drinking comes from this river, and here's the health of that river, right? In Indonesia, for example, we've built the algorithms that allow them to plan where to put mobile towers in 300 cities. What would have taken them 2 years to plan that, using NVIDIA chips, we were able to do that in 2 months in our algorithms. The final thing I'll talk about is here in Rwanda. The big challenge that we have in Africa is the shortage of doctors. So in the US and other developed markets, there's about 300 patients per doctor. In Africa, it's 8,000 patients per doctor. In South Sudan, it's 66,000 patients per doctor. And those few doctors that we have are leaving, right? Ghana graduates 600 doctors a year, and 300 leave on graduation day to go to the UK. So how do you bring healthcare to people in this context? So what we're doing is we've created this thing called the Rural Health Operating System, where it's got 4 components. The first is we're digitizing rural clinics, so about 400 clinics in Rwanda, using SpaceX satellite to give them high-speed bandwidth. And then with that, you can put all kinds of sensors in the clinics. So for example, we have got sensors in the fridges that can detect the temperature of a vaccine. And if it's not safe, a signal is sent to Zipline, and Zipline drops fresh vaccine within 30 minutes. And you can administer it safely to a patient, right? And electronic healthcare records and all kinds of things. Then the second aspect of it is you then can augment healthcare professionals. So, imagine a community healthcare worker that now has access to, all the medical knowledge to be able to treat someone almost like a doctor would, right? Because 80% of the world's medical knowledge has only been discovered in the last 5 years. So if you're a doctor that was trained more than 5 years ago, you don't even have the latest knowledge, but the AI will. And you can then augment a nurse or community healthcare worker to do things that more advanced healthcare personnel would have done before. The third aspect of it is intelligence center. So once you've connected the clinics and you have these augmented professionals, then all the data comes into an intelligence center, which allows us to track real-time what's going in the whole system. How many babies were born yesterday? What is your disease burden by district? How do you allocate your resources as a minister? How do you predict the next pandemic? So you can react much, much faster, right? And the final thing we're doing is we're using AI to figure out where to put the health centers, right? Because very often as leaders of political systems, you make decisions based on who makes the biggest noise, right? So some voter is making some noise and say, okay, let me put a clinic there. Let's put a school there. But with data analytics, you can take a dispassionate view and actually say, based on what all the analytics are telling me, where should I put my clinics and what should the referral network look like to make sure I have the optimal access? If I only have $200 million, I can spend it and either impact 5 million people or it could impact 10 million people with more intelligent allocation of resources. And today, with all the pressures that we're facing as a continent, with aid being cut and everything, we have to do more with less. And large systems like this allow you to make these decisions at scale for better governments and for ultimately to improve the humanity.
Thank you, Fred. I think you should invite everyone to go and see what you just talked about. I think it's 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's 5 minutes
in the city.
Yeah, people can go and see it.
Right, and it's a really good point you ended on the pressures of today. What do you, if you have the money, how do you impact more people than you would otherwise use it for, or even be dispassionate about how you impact as many people as you can. And coming to you, Emmanuel, I think trade is a very, very big component into this. We've talked about the technology, we've talked about equity, we've talked about skilling, but we've not really touched on what does trade look like in the AI ecosystem. And I wanted to ask you, from the WTO point of view, because we know WTO and we think about traditional trading, export negotiations and tariffs, and etc. How do you guys understand AI and how it's going to impact global trade in particular, and the risks that you think are associated with it?
Yes, thank you. We actually published a report in November of last year, November 2024, on AI and trade. It's called Trading with Intelligence, how AI shapes and is shaped by international trade. It discusses precisely these issues, how AI, what does it mean for the future of trade? How is it going to impact trade? And trade is a powerful engine for development. We have some simulations in the report that show that if there is a global adoption of AI, in an optimistic scenario, it could lead to 14% percentage points of growth of real exports. But if there is uneven AI adoption globally, then the benefits of AI could be halved. What we discuss in the report are the different benefits that AI can bring to international trade, and in particular in terms of reduction of trade costs. It can help to optimize logistics, it can help to meet regulatory requirements, and so this can be especially beneficial for small and medium-sized enterprises. It can also affect trade services, and you mentioned healthcare. We also heard this morning about education, where the impact can be huge. It will change the pattern of trade and services. Some services may be negatively impacted, but we will see growth in other services sector, and it's expected to boost the productivity of a number of sectors like the financial sector and insurance in particular. And what we find through our research is that digitally delivered services will be the sector that will increase the most as a result of AI. And of course, a big impact also on trade in AI-related products, semiconductors, which are needed to train AI models, but also all the ICT products that are needed, raw materials. So the whole supply chain is going to be impacted by AI, and comparative advantages. We heard this morning about the importance of energy. I think, Africa has a lot of renewable, sun, so a lot of renewable energy, and here this is really an opportunity for the African continent. So it's going to impact trade in many different ways, and it's important to keep that in mind in order to see how to best grab the benefits of AI and boost economic development. But as I said, we see a big difference when AI is not adopted globally, and so one of the things that need to be addressed is the question of the digital divide, and I know it has been discussed extensively in, this morning and in the earlier sessions, and we do see a big risk of exacerbating the digital divide, a big gap in AI patents, for example, in published articles, in investment, with the US leading clearly ahead of other economies. We talked about data centers in earlier sessions. Here, 2% of data centers are located in Africa only. So it's 0.1 data center per 1 million people in Africa against 0.5 data centers globally. And in North America, it's even 3 data centers per 1 million inhabitants. So there's a need to address that. So significant opportunities, but in order to grab these opportunities, a number of measures have to be taken. And what we flag in the report is that trade matters, AI matters for trade, but trade and trade policies also matter very much for AI. The AI supply chain is very complex. It uses advanced semiconductors that are designed in California, that are produced in Asia, that use equipment built in Europe with raw materials that come from all over the place. And so trade measures are particularly important. You want to ensure that trade can flow smoothly in order to promote AI deployment and development. And there are agreements like the Information and Technology Agreement that we have at the WTO that eliminate tariffs on ICT products. So they're worth $3 trillion. But I was actually checking the list this morning, and apart from Morocco, there's no African country that is a party to this plurilateral agreement. Likewise, I was looking at the numbers of the OECD Digital Trade Restrictiveness Index, and Africa has the highest level of restrictions on trade in services. So these are things that I think need to be kept in mind if you want to promote the development and deployment of AI, putting in place the right ecosystem, and the right regulatory framework is important. And Lassina Cohn in the previous session was talking about regulation as an enabler. I think it's very important. If you do want to promote AI, it's important to put in place an enabling regulatory framework. And trade does matter in that respect.
You talked about semiconductors, and you'll allow me to deviate you a bit, because what we are now seeing, especially with AI, is a more pronounced let me call it like protectionist stance around the supply chain of the technology in itself. What kind of mechanisms would WTO start, or engagements to ensure that? Because I think tomorrow for us as Africa, when we say that we don't want to only be consumers and we want to also be producing, that becomes some of the barriers that that several countries are faced with. At WTO, how do you start unlocking these conversations?
Okay, so two dimensions. First, there are already a number of rules that exist and that can be leveraged. So I mentioned the Information and Technology Agreement, which is a plurilateral agreement, not a multilateral agreement. So becoming a party to this agreement to reduce tariffs on ICT products can help. You have agreements like the GATS, the General Agreement on Trade in Services, to promote the liberalization of services, including AI-enabled services, so which provides more openness, predictability, and can promote investment. There's an agreement on intellectual property as well to try to foster innovation while encouraging technology transfer. So there's already a corpus of rules that exist. But there are also negotiations and discussions at the WTO on digital trade. So not AI per se for the moment, but digital trade. But some of these issues matter very much for AI when you talk about data flows, data restrictions, when you talk about open government data, for example. And we also start having discussions on AI in some committees. There were some discussions related to the EU AI Act, for example, or in the committee dealing with intellectual property. And members are now thinking about how can we have a more coordinated and a structured approach to AI? Is there a need to have a forum where that can be discussed in a holistic manner as opposed to discussions in different committees and sort of a siloed approach? So I'm sure we'll see more in the coming months on that front.
Thank you very much. And continuing to think about the supply chain, I'll go to Aisha and think about the requirement for infrastructure around that these technologies really do require significant data and compute infrastructure. Within Google and specifically for Africa, how are you thinking about building this foundational capacity, looking at how all of us are hungry for this?
Good question. I think, so I'll answer it in two ways. One is sort of directly on the infrastructure side, and then one will be a bit more on like another way that you could see infrastructure. So on the infrastructure side, of course, if people do not have access to good internet, so I know Google, we have invested in cables, two different cables, the Equiano and Umoja cables, one coming from Australia, the other from Portugal, so just to increase that capacity across the continent. We've also invested and just launched our cloud region, so the data center in South Africa, and that's important in many areas, so not just thinking of purely like from a data and warehousing perspective, but also to provide a place where all the researchers, the scientists, the startups can deploy their models and build their models and use tools and leverage that data in the compute. And so I think having that on the continent is essential to what you say. And then the third aspect will be my interpretation of infrastructure, and that to me is how we think about capacity, skills, and tomorrow. Because we're talking about how AI looks now, how it's important now, but tomorrow is key. So that's very important for a very young continent. So how are we training or providing digital skills? That's one thing that we support as Google across Africa. We have an academy there. How are we, many of us are parents in the room, how are we sensitizing and socializing with our children how to use AI? And some of our children might be a little bit faster than us, so I know I race against mine, and how important it is, but they are the future and they will be building the frontier technologies of the future. And then lastly, I'll say, thinking about education at the core as a infrastructure element across the continent and how important that is. And that comes in partnerships, investments, working with teachers, educators, different ways of learning. So I think, you have the hardware infrastructure, but then there's this notion of maybe a soft infrastructure that's equally as important that needs to be across the continent as well.
Thank you very much, Aisha. Coming back to you, Fred, I think when we think about this, we've talked about what you're currently doing with Sun Technologies and all the amazing things that you've used AI really and the solutions that are deployed. I'm trying to now maybe get from you what do you think in the next few years we could anticipate as a result of us having the AI as a technology that we use, whether it's in healthcare, employment, and everywhere else. What does the future look for Sun Technology, but also in general?
So I think the future, if harnessed properly, it can be very bright, right? For Africa and for the rest of the world. AI has the potential to change everything, but like so much in Africa, it ultimately boils down to leadership, right? Are we actually going to, take the steps that we need to take in our companies, if we're in the private sector, or if we're in the government, or if in the city, to actually take advantage of this technology? So AI has been around for 40 years. It's not a new thing, right? What has woken the world up is the latest iteration, which is large language models, right? With Anthropic and OpenAI and Google's Gemini and so forth. But it's important to understand that large language models are trained on the internet, because at the end of the day, data is what drives AI. So the data that has been used to build the LLMs comes from the internet. And a lot of AI researchers believe that only about 10% of the world's data is on the internet, right? And we're reaching what they call peak data, which is we've almost used up all the data that we have. And so the level of continued productivity improvements that we'll start to see from the LLMs might diminish over time. So I believe that the next frontier is all the data that has not yet been, that is not yet in our models, right? So where's the other 90%? It sits inside the enterprise, or it has not yet been digitized. It's in library books and things like that, right? So the world needs to unlock that other 90% of data and bring that into the models of the real world, right? So some of the work that we're doing is looking at that other 90%, right? The data that is not on the internet.
How does that look like?
So this is data that is coming from your cell phones when you're walking around. It's data that's coming from cameras and sensors, you know, on buildings and on machines and in cities and on satellites. And all of that data you can bring into, you know, so the models that we build are physics-based models where you model how does a factory work? How does a water utility work? How does a telecommunications network? So for example, last week, a transformer blew up that shut down Heathrow Airport, right? It cost them $100 million. LLMs will not detect when that transformer is going to blow up because you need a physics-based model of the electric utility. So those are the kinds of systems that we build, where the data is coming from, you know, so for example, most of the world's energy infrastructure is about 70 years old, and it's aging. And also the workforce that manages these infrastructure are also aging. So you need AI co-pilots for the humans that have to manage this aging infrastructure. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so that you can, because you've got, you know, an aging workforce in many of these countries, and you need to be able to manage this complex infrastructure. And so the data that is going to come from the real world, you can think of almost like large world models, right? Or large quantitative models where the data is not coming from the internet, but it's coming from all these other sources that we have access to, thanks to sensors and things like that. And the next wave of, and it's going to solve real big problems for humanity. So one of the things I want to encourage everyone here in the room is to not get blindsided by just, you know, LLMs. That is just the latest of a long series of innovations that have been on a 50-year journey, and there's a lot more to come. So open your eyes and think about the full breadth. Start with the problems that we need to solve, and then look at all the technologies that can be brought to solve it, not just large language models. And that's when we'll see real improvements in productivity.
I know. Actually, I don't know. You're doing the research. Do you have anything to add to that?
When I think about the future, it's the young generation. So it's the innovation that's coming from startups, those great ideas. I think those are things I can't even imagine sometimes. So yes, we similarly work on a lot of Africa challenges, global scale challenges as Google Research Africa. But also I want to flip to the other side is the opportunities and the creativity that comes from that, and the revenue generating, and the job creation, and the economic improvement that comes from that. So I think that there is an open area for the future of AI on how it's going to help with job security for this enormous youth population across the continent. I don't know what the answer is. It'll be several different types of models and helping different companies and individuals to be able to earn a living. But I think like there's something fascinating about that there, and the creativity across the continent that, you know, AI with our mind share can really make a powerful difference if we use it correctly on the future. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask if we can get 2 questions from the audience.
Can I just, maybe if you, I just wanted to add to what has just been said now on AI. I mean, this conference is on AI, but as we heard, AI will really have its best potential if it's used in conjunction with other technologies. And I very often use the term tech cocktail. You know, when you do a cocktail, you don't want to use only one ingredient, right? You put several. And I think what the future will look like, and we'll be able to really solve real world problems, is if we can use these different technologies in sync in the right way so that they can reinforce each other. So we heard a lot about IoT and AI. When it comes to trade, you can add to it DLT as well, because it can bring bring a level of security, transparency, traceability, allows people, stakeholders to interact on a peer-to-peer basis. And there are some very interesting projects out there that leverage these technologies in sync to really bring the best of these different technologies and have a transformative impact. So it's really thinking of these technologies, the interconnectedness of these technologies that is important, I think, for the future.
Definitely, definitely. I'll take the tech cocktail part of it. I don't know if there's 2 questions we can take from the audience. There's a gentleman here and someone else behind me. Yes, let's start with the gentleman here.
Thank you very much. I'm Mutambara from Zimbabwe. The next big thing is quantum computing. Can I get some views from the panelists in terms of the combination of quantum computing and AI? What is the future?
Good. As you think about it, let's ask the lady.
Thank you. My name is Chizo Maureen. I'm a Rwanda national. I run a startup and mainly with mail systems and building basically solutions for different organizations or companies. My question, as the topic here says, there's a future economic growth and synergies and creating synergies. So seeing that there's a huge digital literacy gap in terms of populations in Africa, and we are aiming for, Africa digital sovereignty. And, as Mr. Fred said, it's ever evolving, it's going to keep moving, and it's not stopping. And we're going to leave this huge gap of data literacy, but we're aiming for data sovereignty. So how are we the different people here on the panel, the different strategies that are being done to close this gap and not leave anyone behind? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So who wants to take up the first one, quantum and AI?
Usually I refer to quantum as AI on steroids. I mean, it's just going to amplify everything. I mean, it's just moving to another level, much faster, much more powerful. And I think at the end of the day, the challenges that we are facing with AI will be exacerbated by quantum computing. So that's why it's important to act as fast as possible in order to try and address issues like the digital divide and connectivity infrastructure, so that when the time comes, countries are ready to actually grab the benefits of quantum computing as well.
So I can comment on that. So in quantum, most people believe that we're probably 10 years away from having a truly accessible quantum computing. Google, I know, has recently done some really cool experimentation, some breakthroughs there, but it's still very much, something in the future. So the way I look at it is, quantum computing, the way it works is that, most chips store data in terms of ones and zeros. So with quantum, you have infinite states that you can store data in. So it allows you to process things much faster and to store things in much larger quantities. So it's going to create great opportunities, but also great risks. The great opportunities will be, things like drug discovery and mathematical problems that have never been able to be able to solve before. Great improvements in healthcare, and we're going to have, we can solve cancer and we can solve very complex problems for the world much faster and possibly much cheaper. But it also means it's going to be easier for bad actors. So, for example, today, the encryption that's used in cybersecurity to protect a lot of data that we move around, or your password and your bank account and everything, most algorithms would take 70 years to crack those codes. With quantum, you can do it in 2 hours. Mm-hmm. So that means all these nefarious actors will be able to do bad things, when you move to driverless cars and you have planes that are being driven autonomously, bad actors can hack those systems. So you can imagine all of a sudden you've got a bunch of driverless cars in a city and they're just, accidents, or you're flying in a plane and a bad actor takes it over, and, terrorism and so forth. So the cybersecurity risks are going to be really amplified with quantum. And so we have to be thinking, and that's why one of the things that, obviously in African Leadership Group, which is the precursor to SAN Technologies, we're training a lot of people. And as we looked at training technology talent, we said, let's not train them in tech first. Let's train them in ethics and values first. So last year, we trained about 600,000 people through our ALX program across Africa. But they go through 6 to 9 months of training in ethics and values and learning about the problems of the world. So that when you now give them this powerful tool called data science or artificial intelligence, they have the right intentions. So the world is at risk if we train the next generation of engineers just on tech, but you don't give them the ethical foundation so that when they build it, it will be good for humanity. And that's really the risk that we face.
I think that's brilliant. Very, very brilliant. Aisha, anything to add? Or answer, Joseph, for one?
Yeah, you talked about digital skilling and making sure that we are able to keep up, correct? Yeah. So definitely on that. So for digital skilling, keeping up, this is similar to what you've been mentioning, what my colleagues here have been mentioning. It takes everyone. So all sides of the coin are important. You just spoke about ethics and values and bias, and also the skills themselves. I think an element of thinking about how you build capacity, like, sure, you might work in collaboration with a local organization, but are you actually building the skills of those teams in the local organization? I mean, that for me it's like very personal. I don't want to crank the solution for you, but I will walk you through the code in order for you to enter your own data, and you can solve the problem with these tool sets. So I think the more collaborative we are around capacity development, we start to even further address the digital divide. Yes, there are areas where Google specifically is investing in terms of digital skills. It's very important. But in addition to that, thinking about it in the way that we do our work, so collaborating, especially as researchers, where one team might be a domain expert, the other team might be great at computing, working together to share those skills and that knowledge, and not doing everything for someone. Like, walk with them together and take the extra time to make sure that you're building those skills and capacity. And that has to be a core of who you are, and I know it's very important for me because we need to scale all this talent, both on the ethical, the bias side, to the core Gen AI and the quantum side. This is important. And I think, number one, the fact that we're having this conversation now and with these frontier technologies is essential. We are in the AI conversation. Our teams have built AI in Africa, for the world. So we're not completely behind. Now we need to accelerate that, and that's what you talked about is definitely a key part of making that possible.
All right, thank you very much. I think we've had a very, very, very good conversation. I don't know if from our panelists we have one word as a parting shot in terms of what is one thing you're exciting to see in the next 1 year if we come back to this conference?
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, I don't know.
I had a different one word, but
Please.
I was going to just say build or co-create.
Co-create, all right.
Yeah.
Impact.
For me, it's all about collaboration.
Good. Impact, building, and collaboration. Right. Thank you very much. I hope this was very exciting for you guys. I had very interesting panelists, and I'll give you 15 minutes of your time to freshen up. There's a cultural soiree to go to in the next 30 minutes. Be ready to dance and, and have an early evening. But thank you very much, and see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Okay.